Well, everybody, I'm super excited to have back on our podcast Bailey Hale from Farmer Bailey. Welcome.
Hey Scott, thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. And you guys have had quite a year, and it's hard to believe. I know we were just talking, and I can't. It's been over almost over 2 years, I think, since you've been on the podcast, and you have had a lot of changes going on.
Yeah, a few life changes, a few business changes. Life has changed. Life has changed.
Yes, all for the better, all for the better.
100%.
And I'm super excited to catch up, talk about that. I think the last time we were talking, well, first of all, I want to just say that if you haven't heard our first episode with Bailey, I want to encourage you to do that. We'll probably put a link to both on his page on our website and in the show notes here down below on the podcast. So you can catch up on all of those great things. But there's so many new things that's going on that I'm just glad we could make the time to do this. First of all, you were getting ready to move to Portugal the last time we talked. You're there now.
I'm
How's
here now.
Portugal?
Well, I'm in Portugal, which is great, but I'm on the island of Madeira, which is maybe even greater. It's off the coast of Morocco, but it's this tiny little Portuguese island. It's never hot. It's never cold. I can grow anything. Right now in my garden, I have the bananas and the bromeliads and the hibiscus are all looking good, but also have daffodils blooming and the first hellebores are up. Still some chrysanthemums going. But the geraniums never stop. It's kind of wild. It's confusing sometimes to see delphinium and bananas thriving in the same garden, but they do, and I don't question it. The ranunculus are up. I'm sowing my sweet peas this week. So the gardening was really a lot of the reason why we chose this tiny little rock in the middle of the ocean.
Well, so many times I've had and heard people refer to the Pacific Northwest as that Goldilocks zone. Well, I don't know. I think you've leveled it up another notch by moving there. So,
It's kind of a San Diego climate, sort of similar to what you find in like Cape Town, South Africa, parts of New Zealand. For me, it is kind of the Goldilocks zone because you can grow everything tropical and everything temperate. I do have to put my tulips in the cooler, but people seem to be doing that these days anyway.
yeah.
Um, Peonies are maybe the last thing that I'll need to figure out how to grow, but that's okay. If I can grow everything else, I can maybe live without peonies.
That's sad, but I'm sure you'll figure it out.
I can grow ranunculus as big as my head, so that's some small
Wow. Yeah,
consolation for me.
that's a fair consolation. That's awesome. Well, you guys have been just doing so many great things. I know recently it looked like you hosted a field trip to the Netherlands. So tell us about that.
That's been a little project in the back of my head for a long time. When I go to these trade shows, particularly in the Netherlands, it just strikes me how not how little American growers know, but how much more they need to know about our industry. By some accounts, the cut flower trade in the world is a $30 billion industry, and we're a part of that. We're definitely a part of that. And the trends in Europe affect what we do, and the trends in Asia and South America. I was visiting Luke's Lysianthus. They produce 60 million stems of Lysianthus every year. And we wouldn't have, Voyage Light Apricot Lysianthus if they weren't also producing it. They call it Alyssa over there, but it's the same variety. So a lot of these items that we are so fortunate to have now in America are bred for these giant producers around the world. And the fact that they open their doors and let us come and look, I mean, they understand that we're not about to go build a, $100 million facility to
Right.
compete with them, but they believe in the flower. And if they're promoting Lysianthus in America one way or the other, it only benefits them at the end of the day because that's their bread and butter. That is their livelihood, is this one particular flower. So yeah, we had about 50 of our staff, and mostly growers and customers. Actually, some were not even customers, just people I thought needed to see behind the curtain a little bit. But to see all the breeders and all the new varieties, yeah, for the first time, I think some of these people were a little bit speechless.
Yeah, that's what I was just trying to think back to the very first time I've ever seen an operation like that. And it is overwhelming, but I guess because of where I'm at in the flower chain, I see a lot of both sides of it. So maybe it's not as big, but I mean, I wish I could have been there almost just to be a fly on the wall. Especially like I saw those scenes where people are walking into that Celosia production, that facility, and I'm like, I mean, how do you have that many perfect stems of Celosia at the same time? It's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, they're controlling for everything. They control for temperature and light and carbon dioxide and fertility and water. And when you really are growing one crop, that particular grower mostly produces celosia. This time of year, he's switching just to reduce his heating expense for the winter. He switches to stock for the winter months, and then he'll go back to celosia in the springtime. Um, but he understands that crop top to bottom. He knows that you never let celosia drop below, I think, 65 degrees at night. It can get to whatever temperature in the daytime. He knows exactly how many, foot candles or lumens of light they need. Like I said, every single variable is accounted for. And that's why the Dutch are such good growers. They understand the science and they understand the technical side of everything they do. And that's something we can really learn. Also really great to go and see, we went to some big trade fairs and you see 500 rose growers all growing big, fat, perfect roses. And you understand why we don't have a rose industry in the US. But if you really look around at the crops that aren't well represented there, it tells you the things where we can actually make a living, that we can make a living producing. So I don't think we're going to get back, carnation and rose production in a big way, but there's so many specialty crops around the edges that I think our growers, our customers can truly make a living producing.
Yeah, I completely agree. What new things did you see at the show this year? I know that show is so overwhelming because it has something for everyone.
Maybe some of the new things that I was excited about are kind of boring to a lot of people. Some of these new alstroemerias, I just love. There's new ones with no spots in the throat. It just changes the entire look of the flower. There's a lot of breeding going on in limonium. Satis limonium is maybe thought of as kind of a cheap filler flower, but it's actually really quite adaptable. Even some of it is perennial, can be grown in a field setting. The Dutch don't really discriminate. Things that we think of as maybe a cheaper grocery store flower, they'll pair with the most premium, Vanda orchid or peony out of season, whatever, all in the same arrangement. And they're using everything just based on its texture and its color and its shape, not necessarily on is this a good flower or a bad flower. And I think that was also really, really great for people to see that there's really no such thing as a bad flower. Any flower can be used to enhance an arrangement in different
Absolutely.
settings.
Yeah, I agree, and it's interesting because I know when I was there last, and when I see Dutch designers, a lot of times I'm continually amazed how they can take what we would consider to be an ordinary flower and create something just special with it. And it can be just a basic bouquet, but it's the way they make their bouquets. It's the way they include the stems. I mean, I don't know, it just looks different, looks fresh. And I think I agree. There's a lot we can learn from them and steal their ideas and all those things.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can borrow back and forth.
Yeah.
In Europe, floral designers are trained. You have to be accredited to say that you're a floral designer. You can't just start doing it, out of your garage or your basement. That's how I started doing floral design. It's almost like a barber or a hairdresser. You need to show that you have some competency and literacy in the field. And I think that's something we're lacking in the US. So that's part of why they're, maybe a little better at putting these things together. Also, they have access to just the best flowers in the world. And what they pay retail is generally cheaper than we would pay wholesale in America. So there's a lot of different variables at play. But it doesn't serve us to not know what's going on. And generally, they're really welcome to open their doors. Visit a really fun Gerbera breeder. I love Gerberas, even though they're quintessentially 90s in my mind. Some of the new colors and shapes are super exciting. I mean, they're a round flower. A lot of them have a lot of petals, come in all kinds of colors. Why are they any worse than a dahlia or I remember when dahlias were also looked down upon and now they're kind of a luxury item. I remember when zinnias, you would never consider using those in design work, and now they're all the rage. So I tend to withhold my judgment. I've always loved carnations, even back when they were really, really unpopular. So I don't really have a bias towards any one flower or another. But I do love seeing the new colors and the new shapes.
Yeah, I do too, especially with Gerbers. I mean, I think you have I know recently I saw something on Instagram where you were posting or someone was posting this amazing variety. I don't remember the name, but it's like almost this neutral. I don't even know how to describe the color of it. I don't. Do you remember which one it was? I think I may just have to look here real quick
Yeah, I
because
don't know
it's um
exactly the one you're talking about. We have this new
Marimo
Rebel.
Marimo
Oh,
green and is it Marimo dark? I don't.
yeah, green and brown. It's actually just kind of the center of the Gerbera without the petals. They don't actually make the petals at all. It's just kind of this almost like Cresspedia, but in a more earthy tone. That add just that little textural element. There's new Rebel series that have you might have seen these pasta Gerberas. It's that kind of style
Oh
where
yeah,
the petals look almost like noodles and they have a different color on the backside. Um, they would be really fun to design with. I'm excited for more American growers to give them a try.
yeah. Well, I mean, I know a few years ago, it feels like it was just in the infant stages of that being produced on a local level. Are more and more growers figuring it out? I mean, because I know they require year-round, temperatures. Basically, you can't just, grow them in a high tunnel.
Yeah, Gerbers, I think, would be a more technical crop than others. As the Dutch are so good at, they can control the light and the carbon dioxide and the fertility. And so that plant never knows stress for a moment in its life. And when you can keep something that happy, they're just putting out a couple stems a week and they'll go for 3 years. So by the end of that plant's life, you may have harvested, hundreds of stems off that one plant. To do that, you're generally growing in like a hydroponic system. So the upfront cost of getting that all set up is more substantial. We've had a couple growers. Ironically, a lot of Gerbera greenhouses went out of business in America when the hemp and cannabis boom was starting. And actually, I've helped advise some growers who have found themselves with a greenhouse that was designed for hemp production or cannabis production that is now being turned into a Gerbera greenhouse because it is so technical and perfectly set up for these higher, just more technical crops. Not impossible. There's just a lot of variables that you need to be aware of. It's not a zinnia. You can't just plant the seed and stand back. But I think they're worth it for the more technical grower, the person who's maybe looking to produce all year long, who can heat a greenhouse at, maybe in northern Vermont, it made no sense to be heating a greenhouse because it was just so cold in the winter. But
Yeah,
if you're just compensating 10 degrees, that might make a lot of sense for a more southerly grower or a coastal grower where the temperatures are milder.
sure, sure. Well, okay, so you've mentioned this a couple of times, and I don't remember this from school, so I'm going to ask you this question. No pressure here. So you've mentioned carbon dioxide a couple times in relation to crops and keeping them happy, and I'm curious exactly how that works and the dynamic because yeah, that's not something you hear very often, but I know in Holland they are very much so precise with everything that it doesn't surprise me they monitor that. So how does that work, and what's the deal, Bailey?
Well, just like we need oxygen to keep living, plants need carbon dioxide to live, but also to produce carbohydrates. And there's carbon is the key element in both carbon dioxide and carbohydrates. That's where they get the building blocks to make new flowers and new buds. If you've ever been in a greenhouse where you might see a row of flowers and then there's kind of a dip in the row where for some reason that section is not growing as well as some on either side of it. That's often because it's generally in the middle of the greenhouse where they're not getting as much ventilation, they're not getting as much airflow, and they're not getting as much carbon dioxide. So they're kind of starved of one of the key things they need to stay happy. Really, if you can keep a plant happy every moment of its life, it's going to give you an exceptional flower at the end of its life when we cut it down. So carbon dioxide can really be a limiting factor in a lot of production. That's one of the reasons why horizontal airflow, having those fans above your production really does make your crop more uniform because it's circulating the air. But if you have a closed system like you do, especially in a heated greenhouse, those plants are depleting that carbon dioxide faster than it can be produced or that it can seep back in from outside. So you get this kind of bubble of it's almost the air is too pure, it's too much oxygen. The plants can't continue to grow. So they actually do they'll capture some of the CO2 from the combustion of their fuels. Or they even buy big tanks of CO2 that are, they go these little pipes right between each row of the beds and make sure that the levels are perfect at all times. And they study all of these variables. You might see these on the culture sheets that the breeders and the growers, they supply this information to you. I think a lot of us kind of glaze over and skip that part because we know we can't do anything about it. But actually, a little increase in CO2 can make a big difference in the quality of production.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting because you think about it, but you don't think about how much they need or how their consumption. But when you are in that closed environment of a glass house or a sealed house, during the winter time, especially with the heat and there's no ventilation or very little ventilation. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, think about one Lysianthus plant. It's a Native American wildflower just growing out in the prairie. It's got all the wind in the world blowing around it. It has fresh air. It has
Yeah.
all the CO2 it needs. But you put, 10 million of them in one greenhouse at the same time, and all of its neighbors are fighting for the exact same element or the same compound. It runs out. So the Dutch have figured this out. The Dutch are smart.
Yeah, they are. They are, especially when it comes to this stuff. Well, one of the other things I was super excited to start seeing over the last couple of years is you have now partnered with some West Coast farms. And for all those people, I know I was talking with a grower just the other day. In fact, I think we're going to release our episode here soon and talking about how wished they could get more stuff from you and, Farmer Bailey. And they were like, oh, but now they can get a few things. And it's like, I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, we're in our second year. Just talking about plugs, we're working with Plug Connection. They're in Vista, California, which is kind of in the San Diego area between San Diego and LA, but inland a bit. Really beautiful climate where they're always getting cool winds from the ocean, but a nice dry climate, so they don't really have fungal problems. Just a really, really great, just a naturally great place to be producing a plug crop. We partnered with them because we really did want to, have a more cost-effective option for West Coast growers. It's really expensive to get stuff from the East Coast to the West Coast. The Rockies are really big.
The big speed bump.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, luckily we don't see too many claims in terms of, things freezing in transit. But anytime we've had a really big issue, it's generally something that is trying to get across the Rockies. So just being able to supply the western part of the U.S. more directly. It's not an identical catalog to grow and sell, but a lot of the same Lysianthus are there. Even Scoop Scabiosa and Skylar Veronica. It's all there coming from California. So they're also a great partner. Grow and Sell in Pennsylvania is the partner where we started our business. They're still our primary grower and an excellent partner of ours. But we wanted to be able to have options on both sides of the country. You can order from either of them. They'll ship coast to coast. But obviously, the further the plant travels, the higher the cost has to be. Shipping costs are not going down, and I don't imagine they will ever go down. So that's just part of the budgeting.
Sure. But I would also think there's some things that aren't allowed to be shipped into California. I mean, is that an easy barrier? I mean, I understand the freight costs, but just agriculturally speaking.
Yeah, it really depends on the county in California, evidently.
Oh, okay.
Particularly if they have a big wine industry in that county, they're more likely to stop packages, even if they're fully inspected and good to go. Sometimes we've had, they'll open a box and see a bug, and it's actually a beneficial predatory wasp that is there to kill bugs, but they see that and they destroy the entire order rather than, asking the entomologist what they're looking at. So it is nice to have stuff produced within California so we don't have that extra worry at the border. We'll say we're also working with Terra Nova Nurseries. Terra Nova is a perennial breeder and producer up in Oregon.
Amazing.
So we have two options now. And we've been producing their varieties with Grow and Sell in Pennsylvania, but now we can also supply directly from Terra Nova. Really at the forefront of echinacea breeding is, that you've seen that Supreme Cantaloupe. That's really kind of everybody's favorite, but they have a whole lot of others in process, and they're really interested in supplying cut flower growers. If you've been to a garden center, if you're fortunate enough to have a garden center in your town anymore, um, you see that everything is kind of this roundy moundy meatball shaped short stuff. And the industry will tell you that, oh, people's gardens are smaller. We need smaller plants. But really, it's just they want to fit more plants on a cart, more carts on a truck, because they're delivering these things across the country now rather than producing them locally. The breeders are producing tall plants. They're breeding tall plants in the process. If you're trying to, echinacea wants to be tall. If you're looking for a short one, you're going to be throwing away 90% tall plants. So they have actually been producing tall ones. They just held them back because they don't think the market wants them. So I've had the pleasure of going to look at some of these trial fields and earmarking a few that I know our growers really need to get their hands on. There's a place for these in the industry. And the breeders are listening, particularly Terra Nova. My friends Chuck and Harini out there are really fun to work with. And I told you earlier, they sent me a picture yesterday that I can't even tell you what it was of because I'm sworn to confidentiality, but they're working on crops that we've never even thought of cutting before. And I'm excited. I'm excited to bring those to market whenever they're ready to let me. It's going to be, the sky is the limit with plant breeding. You just have to have the imagination, have the idea of what it is you want to produce, and then spend 10 or 15 years trying to get there.
Yeah, that's all. That's all. Well, I know when you mentioned that to me earlier, I of course, was quite envious because I'm always looking for something new. And I know when we've had breeders on in the past, this is the thing that always drives me so crazy is there are so many plants that get discarded because it doesn't fit that cookie cutter formula to either show up at a big box store or, like you said, to get more plants on a truck or whatever, what have you, whatever the reason is. And yet there's this whole market of cut flower growers that would just jump over the fence to get that because it's just so, I don't know. There's just so many great things out there that I'm excited to hear that people are not, I guess, are considering us a viable market again. Because it just makes me sad to think that either, I don't know, either they don't think about us or they just, there's more money in the retail side of it. I don't know. I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I think by the volume, we are really quite small as compared to the retail market. And, certainly if it's not a product that would be suitable for large production in Colombia or Ecuador or Holland, they're not going to make as much money as if, they do have something that's that commercial and that such a commodity crop. But that's really where American growers are making the difference is finding these not little necessarily, specialty products that maybe don't travel well, maybe
Right.
are really well suited to seasonal production. And that's now the breeders are listening a little bit more. I remember when I was in college, so this would have been late 90s, maybe 97, I was in Europe traveling with my horticulture club, and we visited a rose breeder in Germany. And he was talking about how, anything green or brown or gray, we throw that away. Nobody wants that. We're breeding for red and pink and yellow. So I think we could have seen things like amnesia or toffee or all these specialty colors decades earlier, but the breeders have just been throwing them away because they didn't see the market for them. So now that more people are aware, the internet has made the world a smaller place. We can see what the trends are. I think the future is bright. I think we're going to start seeing some really interesting stuff, maybe on small scale, but American growers do small scale really well.
Yeah, they do. They do. And I think that's where that expression, what is the riches are in the niches. And I think that's where, of course, that niche, whatever. But my point is you just really feel like that is where our farmers really shine and they really excel. And I don't know. I'm super excited about that. I feel like there's just so many options out there. Everywhere I go, I feel like I just see so much potential, and I think we just have to be ready to zig or zag and just really, be thinking long term. Whether it's like I know you've been introducing more woodies and things like that, which I was really excited to hear because I feel like again that's one of those crops that more people can explore. How has that gone for you guys, that release? Because you did that, what, a year ago? You started releasing the woody project?
Yeah, were selling them around this time last year for shipping this past spring. It went really well. We've been working with Colster Breeding in the Netherlands, actually producing the plants as well. The real problem, the real hurdle, not a problem, the challenge has been that these big wholesale nurseries in America require that you buy an entire pallet, and that might be 20 or 30 trays of something, and 18 or 32 plants of each, if not more. And that's just well outside of what most of us need as small growers. Or maybe we want that much, but we want 10 or 20 of each variety.
Right.
So we have the full range of products that harvest all season long. And it's taken a while to find someone to work with who will listen to us and say, yeah, we can help you with that. Colster also recognized they were a traditional shrub landscape breeding family in the Netherlands. They're in their fourth generation. But they had some, I don't know if it was flowering branches or berried branches, and they said, hey, these might do well at the Dutch auction. Let's take them to the cut flower auction. And they sold like hotcakes, and they got a really good price. And so people started asking them for more. And similarly, they're still breeding for landscape plants, but if they see something that is particularly tall or straight or upright or fast growing, they understand that's going to be a better producer for a cut flower grower. So they have a whole line. The magical line has been selected specifically for its cut flower uses. Ilex, right? Ilex verticillata is the one that's on my mind right now. I saw so much of it in the Netherlands. These glowing oranges and bright golds are just perfect for the Halloween to Thanksgiving season. And then obviously the day after Thanksgiving, we all switched to red. And there's really no better source for red at Christmas time than Ilex verticillata. So we have a nice selection of those. Still, we'll get them in the spring. If people are on the fence, I would say go on and order them, not because I'm trying to sell you on anything, but there's been a lot of tariffs that are being threatened under the new incoming administration, and we're going to try to get these plants into the US before that happens. The price may go up a lot. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but it's something that will affect us all if it does. We are working with some American producers to produce these Dutch crops. Our hydrangea and our Philadelphus will be coming from American growers. There's also import restrictions that allow some crops to come in and make other crops, require quarantine before they can be distributed. So it's a lot of logistics. It's a lot of boring paperwork stuff, but we have the team to handle it now.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I feel like a lot of times we don't really understand what's involved in it. And it is a lot of paperwork, and it's a lot of just kind of following the rules to get it done as quick as possible. So that way we can all get our plants. I'm excited to hear about the hydrangea and Philadelphus that is going to be produced. You said here in the US?
Yes, some in Maryland, I think some in maybe Minnesota, and then it will come together for distribution. We did some last year as well. These will also be from Colster Breeding in the Netherlands. These are magical series. So both paniculata and macrophylla type hydrangeas. People know Limelight and PG as the paniculata types. Really hardy, perfect for northern growers, but they go into most of the South as well. And they bloom on new wood, so you don't have to worry about, you can cut them back hard every year, and they will keep blooming year after year. The macrophyllas, there are some now that will bloom every year. Those are the blue and pink ones that you see a lot in coastal areas or in certain parts of the South. They're very happy. These are the ones that are grown in greenhouses in much of the world. And if you leave them on the plant, they get these beautiful antique tones, which we are also seeing a lot of in the Netherlands in November. It's that, they're just gorgeous right now. But we've been getting more requests for those. And then the Philadelphus from Colster is just a big double. It's just superior because it's on a nice tall straight stem. It's a vigorous producer, and the fragrance is amazing. So we're hoping to get more mock orange into people's hands.
Yeah.
This year we tried last year, and then actually we sold a lot, and we had to disappoint people because we realized that it's actually related to hydrangea, and anything related to hydrangea cannot be imported, and we had to scratch that whole line item from our list and disappoint a lot of people. So we're going to double down this year, and we've contracted with a propagator in America to produce it stateside.
Oh, that's awesome. How many varieties of hydrangea are you producing?
I think we'll have 7 or 8 this year. There's so many out there that
I know.
if we had the demand for them, we could make it happen. But they do have to come in under specific guidelines and quarantine and then be propagated. And sometimes guessing how many we could actually sell is it's a little tricky. You don't know how many people are actually looking for these types of things. Um, it's part of why on our website we really encourage people. There's that little button that says "Notify me" if something's out of stock. That really helps us know how much we need for the next year.
Mm,
And also, we will always let you know first if you click that button before we announce it to the world. So you will also get some priority in ordering. But yeah, trends change. People, maybe they've already got their ilex and there's some Carpus in the ground and they're looking for something else. And we also encourage people to just shoot us an email because we're always looking at catalogs and talking to people really around the world these days. And there might be something we have access to. We just don't understand that that's something people are looking for yet.
right. No, I know it's interesting because I get asked that question a lot about, what can I grow or what should I grow? Uh and I feel like there are so many things I feel like we're on this cusp of a tsunami almost of potential plant material that is perfect for perfect for the local farmer grower, and I think that's exciting. You mentioned trends a second ago. What trends do you see coming for next year?
I think just sort of the curve, we see a lot of new growers, and usually by their second or third year, they're finding these holes in their production where they wish they had more stuff. And that's when people start looking at perennials. So I think not only will our perennials continuing to be popular, but the breeders, as I mentioned earlier, are continuing to find more or offer more varieties to us, which is really fun. To your previous point about you know, what should I grow that no one else is growing? Try everything. Almost anything will last at least a couple days as a cut flower. Chuck, the breeder at Terra Nova, he said, "Hey, there's this Dicentra, bleeding heart. It's not the red and white one. That's kind of a longer stem, but it's a different species. I think it's called titanium white. It's a little bit short, but he said, yeah, in my tests, it lasts out of water for like 3 days. And you wouldn't think
Really?
a delicate little flower like that would do so. He said it's a perfect stand-in for lily of the valley. It's not fragrant, but it has that same dainty texture. So it's never going to be a big commercial flower that's produced in any quantity anywhere. But if you have that relationship with your local floral designer and they know that you have this product, it'd be great for boutonniere work, great for corsages, nice in a bouquet because it holds up out of water. Surprisingly, you wouldn't think it would. It looks so dainty.
What's the name
So
of it again?
that's a Dicentra. I think it's titanium white. I should double check myself.
Titanium. Okay.
I believe that's a series. Um, who would have thought? And there's
Yeah.
probably things in your garden and in your neighbor's flower beds. Ask if you can take a little snip and see what happens. Um, Lysianthus wasn't a cut flower until 20, 30 years ago. Someone said, "Hey, let's make this into a cut flower," and now it's one of the most important things to our business. Um, all it takes is someone to get the idea and to start looking at varieties in a new light.
Yeah. Well, what I
Um,
love about that is everybody everybody can be on the cusp of discovering something new. I mean, it's not we don't have to necessarily rely on somebody to find out. Well, this is a weed in my area that all of a sudden is now worth something because of shelf life, or a perennial that you just think is really cool, or you know, especially I think of everything you can grow. I can't imagine things that you come across now that uh, on your little island of perfection that
yeah, it's not
there's
fair,
no
but
there's
I did
no
live
bitterness there.
I did live most of my life with negative 40-degree winters, so
That's
I
right.
think I've done my time now.
That's right. It all averages out. That's awesome.
I think another trend, which again might not be a real trend as in new products, but I think going back and looking at some of the standard crops, the gerberas, the limonium, the alstroemeria, stuff that we've kind of written off as low value or grocery store flour. The breeding has continued strong in all of these areas, and the colors they perfectly match. You can find something that will match any color palette, and the textures are only improving. And Like again, the limonium can be super productive over a long period of time, even in the field. Really, if you got to do farmers market bouquets, they really bulk out a bouquet quickly, and people haven't seen it. It's not the standard thing they've seen coming from a local producer. So just the novelty of producing a familiar flower locally. I think I'm seeing more people willing to go back to some of these crops that we've written off for so long.
Yeah, no, I agree. I know because I was this week. Well, it wasn't this week. It was late in the summer. I was looking at Alstroemeria, and I was thinking there are so many different varieties, like you mentioned, and I'm surprised that I haven't seen more people trying, especially farther south, trying to grow some of that. At least, well, again, there's so many varieties, but I feel like if mums are there's heirloom mums, there's all these different species of things, and I just feel like there's opportunities there. There's gaps in there that I think are worth exploring with these really super hardy flowers.
Yeah, the breeders don't. The breeders can be reluctant to want to release these things. Their model is find a grower that wants to plant 5 acres of this variety. They know where they are. They can collect the royalty every year based on the production of that grower. Um, our model in the US is to grow 100 different things in the same small plot. So maybe you want 25 plants, not 25,000. And they're a little hesitant to let this material go out there to 1,000 different growers because they don't know where it is. It's hard for them to collect a royalty. So they need to get the royalty up front. And we're in negotiations on some of this, and we understand we want the breeders. It's really expensive to produce these new plants. When you look at,
Right.
you got to breed 10,000 plants to find the one that ticks all the boxes. So we want them to be supported, but that makes for an expensive investment up front. So that's sometimes if you see a plant that might cost you $12 or $15 to get the plant, you really have to think about the production of that plant. And Alstroemeria can put out just hundreds of stems in its life. So we're about to give in some of these big breeders to let us have access to some. There's been some hesitance there, but it's really more about just understanding what American growers are doing and protecting themselves. They see their stuff get pirated and illegally propagated in other countries, and they're really sensitive to that. So
Right.
I always tell people, don't mess around. Don't mess around with that. If we tell you this plant can't be propagated, please don't. We only get these new plants if we support the breeders who are producing them.
Right. And I mean, people like we've talked about on the podcast before, you know, they're investing multiple six figures into that one plant because of all the plants they've got to discard, getting to it. I mean, it's a huge investment, which makes sense.
And even if you get a nice plant that you think has potential, you're going to spend a good $10,000 getting that plant patented or patent protected for in the Europe for that would only cover you in the U.S. and Europe, not even the rest of the world. So you spend all the money developing it, and then you also have to protect it. Otherwise, there are people who will rip you off. That's a proven fact. So the only way to really protect yourself if you've bred something you think is unique to the world is to get that a plant patent applied to it. Yeah, it's expensive. So there's really no way around that. But in general, if we're charging you a lot for a plant, it's because it has potential to make you money.
Right, right. And they see it too. I know, gosh, there's so many things I want to ask you about. I was super excited. Of course, I received my pansies about a month ago from you guys, and I was super excited to see Aaron planting a whole bunch of your pansies out, trialing them out again for, exploring. I've joked, and I'm not really joking, but I'm just going to say I joked about making 2025 the year of the pansy because of Brenda's book coming out and all these people really looking for revigorating. That's not a word. The cut pansy industry, because it used to be a thing a long time ago, and I just think there's a lot of potential there. So I know you guys had more varieties this year than I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think you're right. At least cut violets used to be a thing. They're all violas. And you read about there used to be some varieties that Geo would carry in their catalog that said they were cutting types, and I grew them. I'm like, I don't get it. I was expecting the stem to be tall. I wasn't thinking about stretching the plant to be tall. Um, but yeah, there's so many colors out there. We have several new people on staff at Farmer Bailey. Bobby Bowen lives in Canada actually, but he's been a friend of mine for a long time, and he's always the one to send me the new variety or the picture of the new thing that's out there somewhere in the world, or the Japanese pansy with all the frills, and he has his finger on that pulse. So we brought. I've been trying to poach Bobby for a long time, but this spring he was ready for a career change. So now he's helping us with variety selection and also writing more cultural guides. Just a little shout out to Bobby and what he's been producing. We have culture guides for almost everything we sell, and you don't have to buy it from us to read those guides. Those are just there to help support American growers in what they are doing. Also, we value your feedback. If you've had a different experience than us, we want to know that. But I said, hey, Bobby, go out there and see what you can find for pansies. And I happen to know that he's a pansophile as well. So he really, I think he's been working with I think a lot of these come from an Italian breeder. A lot of these series are not like super uniform, in the big box stores, they need every color to be exactly the same across every plant. And that's not how these are bred. They're bred for more nuance and different shades. And I think that's really kind of romantic and fun for our style of producers. They're a great early season crop. I was actually trying to find some this spring, up to the Connecticut Cut Flower Collective to pick up some local flowers for a photo shoot. And I hadn't ordered early enough. I saw these beautiful pansies going out with the tulips and ranunculus to other people, but I just couldn't get my hands on them because I hadn't ordered far enough in advance. So for a low heat input, unheated tunnel or minimally heated tunnel, obviously they're tough as nails in the wintertime. I think there's a lot of potential there. It's not an obvious choice, is it? You think they're a bit short, but if you crowd them, give them a little bit of shade, and give them some time, you can get a really usable stem, and they last quite a long time after they are cut.
They sure do. Yeah, I was super excited to have one of our local growers here in Nashville start producing some, not huge quantities, but I don't think they ever lasted more than 3 or 4 hours before they were all gone. So most of them being gone in the first hour. So it was definitely a little frenzy, and they were the perfect color. And yes, they're not long, but when you really sit back and think about the amount of production that happens in floral design, there's a need for some big long stems, but there's a huge percentage of the production that's small, compact centerpieces, bouquet, things that just don't need that stem length and really long for that little special jewel, and they really fit that bill.
Yeah, remember in my design days, by the time the wedding went out the door, you just had this giant mountain of stems on the floor, and you're like, what did I pay for here? Why did I pay for this 80 centimeter rose when I cut off 60 of those centimeters?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I know. And then on top of that, it's how do you, all the waste and I don't know, like you said, the expense. I know that there was a day that you paid for that 80 centimeter rose because the size of the flower was bigger, but now that's not necessarily even true now. Well, okay, so one of the things I saw, and I've been dying to ask you about this, I guess it was when we were at the ASCFG conference in, gosh, where was that one? Up Boston, outside of Boston.
Okay.
No, it was St. Louis. It was St. Louis.
Yes.
When I saw these new small packs for I'm not quite sure what the program, I think, was geared towards either small growers or home growers that are dying to get their hands on some of this stuff. I think you're about to launch something, and I really love to hear more about it and how it works and what's going on with that new program.
This has been another little pet project in the back of my head. I always have ideas, and they can be kind of annoying because until I just do it, it's going to be there and they're going to keep waking me up at night. One of the main questions we get for people is like, I need fewer. I don't need 128. I don't need 128 of this. I want 20, or I want 5, or I'm just a home gardener I'm not going to say just a home gardener. I'm a proud home gardener and I want to try these Lysianthus varieties, but I don't want to spend this money on a packet of seeds and also the time that it
Right.
takes to grow something, a Lysianthus, especially that's 12 or 13 weeks just to get a little baby plant. So we talked a lot about how do we offer just a handful, eight plants to someone? How do we even figure that out? And it really came down to the packaging, the ability to ship that efficiently and safely. That was the real bottleneck. So I found, well, we played around with some paper products because I would prefer not to put any more plastic into the world, but they just kind of fall apart. Paper and water aren't really a good combo. Um, so I worked with a Dutch packaging designer that is working entirely in recycled plastic. It's 100% recycled, and they've helped me manufacture these little miniature trays that can be produced just like our normal plugs and then split apart. And they go into a little clamshell. And in fact, that little clamshell is designed like a little miniature greenhouse. So we've tried a lot of testing. They ship really nicely. The plants get there in really great shape. And then you have a product you can reuse, to start some tomatoes or lettuce or anything on your windowsill. So it's already 100% recycled product and a reusable product, and then it is also recyclable at the end of its life. So I feel okay about that. We're not bringing new plastic into the world. We're just doing something else with stuff that's already here.
Yeah, that's good.
So that, yeah, this launches in December. It's called Garden Club by Farmer Bailey, gardenclubplants.com. Yeah, for the hobby grower, for the enthusiast, or maybe the person who just wants to try 8 or 16 of something. Not only will we have, seed grown plugs, we'll have a lot of, obviously the whole range of Lysianthus and all of the plugs we've all come to love from Farmer Bailey, but also scoop scabiosas and these, maybe eventually some alströmerias and perennial plants that are really good for cutting as well. So those would be in like a 2.5-inch pot size. You can just get 3 of those at a time rather than needing to buy 50 of them. So really just wanting to make these things more accessible. Unfortunately, there just aren't as many great local independent garden centers anymore. And if you are fortunate to be near one, they probably aren't producing all of the hottest cut flowers out there. I'd love to see that change. I'd love to see more people with cut flower gardens. There's such an enthusiasm around cut flowers. I also see a lot of people who's tried to make a living at this and they realize it's really hard work. And frankly, they just want to have a garden and enjoy the flowers and not enjoy trying to run a business, or not be burdened with trying to run the business. So I know personally, I would love to be able to buy these products for my own garden here. We're not producing commercially anymore. I won't be able to get them from the US to Madeira, Portugal, but oh well. At least they'll be available to the entirety of the United States.
That's awesome. So are they going to be like a 3-pack or 6-pack, or do you have multiple options, or is it everything a 3-pack, or how does that work?
Yeah, all the plugs, anything grown from a seed will be an 8-pack.
Okay.
And anything, the vegetatively produced things or tissue culture produced, those will be in a 3-pack. So
Okay.
for now, you can get 8, and it'll be the same size as what we call a 128. So a nice size plug ready to go into the ground. A lot of snapdragons, stock, poppies, things that are seasonally appropriate. We'll have a different lineup for the autumn. We'll sell more digitalis and campanula, that type of thing in the autumn. Again, Lysianthus, I'm sure, will be our biggest crop for spring just because Lysianthus is so great and everybody wants it. But yeah, we're excited to get this launch. It's been honestly years of planning and designing and prototypes, and it's been a really fun process to learn about. But I'm tired of learning. I just want to do.
You just want to get some of these flowers out into the world. Well, I know for me, I don't have the place, but yet obviously I see all these things, and I am excited to have the options to get smaller amounts of Lizzie or whatever just to play with and try and have in my garden. Obviously with everything I do, I don't produce cut flowers anymore, but I still love to garden and I still love to have options. And I think that there's probably millions of people out there that are the same avid gardeners, but don't have access. Or like we were talking earlier, if you want Lysianthus, your only option is to go get something that was either bred to be short or sprayed with hormones to keep them short and whatever to kind of get these little, did you call them meatballs earlier? I don't know what you called them, but you
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? And it's like, but yet we know these flowers can be big and glorious, and now we have access to them and not through the filtered eyes of a big box store. So that's
Yeah,
that's
I think
cool.
we'll start with cut flowers because we know cut flowers and people know us for cut flowers. But this garden club project, ultimately, we're going to branch out into a lot of other things. I love tall plants. Um, a lot of things aren't tall when they're babies. You can ship it as a very small plant and it will still grow to 5 feet in your yard. But just getting it into your hands is the biggest challenge. So I think we'll be branching out into a lot of harder to find garden plants. I was fortunate enough to grow up near a really wonderful garden center, family run greenhouse that's still going. And I remember before I could even drive, I would make my mom drive me there, and I would also make her buy me a wagon full of plants every time we went. Um, it really kind of changed how I felt about horticulture and what was out there in the world because I would find new things every time I went, even though I was that nerd reading the Thompson and Morgan catalog and the Logis catalog and looking for the coolest little thing in the world. Um, but those are fewer and fewer. They're harder to find now. So I also just want to help give access to great plants that have maybe fallen by the wayside. So phase two will be just better and more interesting garden plants, but always with a real focus on cutting flowers.
So I got to ask this. Now, I know when this episode's releasing, and I think it's like just after the launch of this website. So it sounds like this could be for the if you're having a hard time deciding what to buy your garden nerd, garden obsessed relative, this could possibly be something that they could be interested in. I mean, how does that work? Do you order now and it ships in the spring, or will all that work?
Yeah, it'll really be very similar to the Farmer Bailey website in that you select when you want it to arrive. We're going to have some curated collections. So, like here, these four flowers are great planted at the same time, maybe within a certain color palette. We're going to try to make it really easy for you. I should say we're also going to have a whole line of Japanese cutting tools alongside the plants and flowers. And eventually, I think we'll have more horticultural supplies that I personally had trouble sourcing when I was a gardener and a farmer in America, stuff that I knew was out there in the world, and I just couldn't find anybody to deliver it to my door. So we're
Like
working on that
what?
as well. Oh, I mean, really, just cutting tools. The Japanese cutting tools are just the best in the world, and they
I agree.
last. And sometimes I don't know, I go on Amazon and maybe I would be shipped the right thing, but sometimes I would get a knockoff that just didn't hold. So really quality, well made. We might get into English tools eventually, but there's a lot of really strong gardening histories and traditions in the world that have. I'm not saying they've been lost, but they're in danger of being lost, and we really want to help keep these types of things in conversation. Yeah, we'll have gift cards as well, and also just some curated boxes and collections if you're not sure what to send somebody. But for the person who has everything but happens to love the garden, I think they're going to be a really nice gift option. And the goal is to have it available before Christmas. Wish us luck. Now we're closing in on it. We got a really great team working on
Well, if there's a delay, we'll be sure to let everybody know. But we are
it.
looking forward to that for sure. There's just so many great things happening in the world of Farmer Bailey, and it's exciting. It really is exciting to see access to some fabulous plants, taller plants, and even in smaller quantities for those of us who don't need 128 of anything. But I think that's really cool. So with all of that being said, we always end with an advice question, and I don't really know if there's something you'd like to share with our listeners.
Oh, put me on the spot here, Scott. I didn't prepare a nugget of wisdom here. Yeah, I think maybe just something as I've moved to a place now where everything I thought I knew about growing flowers has been turned upside down. Um, go on a little tangent here. So we're on the same latitude as San Diego and Atlanta. We do have a difference in day length from summer to winter. We go down to about 10 hours of daylight in the winter and up to 14 in the summer. But the temperature is about the same all the time. And still, somehow, plants know what time of year it is and when to sprout. And there's narcissus that are blooming now, and others that will bloom in December, and others in January. And they're all synchronized and timed. And they're just reading these cues that nature is giving them that I never realized were there. Growing in Vermont, it's we're frozen or we're not.
Right.
You have summer or you're frozen. And I'm just really learning about how cool plants are again, and how so many things deserve a second look. So I think where my brain and my heart are right now is go back and look at that thing you didn't think you liked, or that someone told you was bad, or someone told you wouldn't sell, because maybe that's the little key to keeping you interested in what you're doing, and maybe your market has forgotten about that flower and they'd like to give it a try. I'm all about second looks and second chances right now.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and I think, I know recently an episode that we just released, we were talking once again about Didiscus, because that's it. That to me, that's the perfect flower kind of to fit that description. Because I remember, like I said before, like I remember when it was produced and it kind of fell out of vogue, and I think it was just the way it was produced. And now we're seeing this, like you guys are selling plants for this now, and it's causing all these smaller scale farmers to grow this amazing flower, and they're cutting it at a great stage. It's not having to be shipped, it's not having to be stored, and all the things that it doesn't love, and it's just such a great flower. And it makes me think back, just like you just said. I want to think back to flowers that we don't see anymore and say why, and is that something we should look at? Because you're right, there's so much potential in all of these lost gems, or these things that we discarded earlier for whatever reason. So
Yeah, I have quite a library of books, a lot of them from the early 1900s and even before. And those books even offer really technical advice on how to produce sweet peas, how to produce violets for cutting. There's a big violet industry in the Victorian era,
yeah,
especially around Rhinebeck, New York, and the whole Hudson Valley area. These tiny, tiny little things that were still viable as a cut flower crop because of the fragrance. So I don't know who's going to pick that up and give it a try. There's a market for it. Battenfeld's greenhouse in that area, they mostly grow anemones now, but they keep a few, and they keep some violets in production just for the nostalgia and just to keep that tradition alive. So look at those things. Look at, I don't know, cut lupins. There's like the Hartwigii types. There's things that used to be really commonly produced local flowers back when your florist was also a flower producer.
yeah,
We don't really call ourselves florists anymore, but in reality, most of what we're doing is old school floristry. You are growing it and you're arranging it and you're selling it as a
yeah,
finished product,
yeah,
and that's what seems to be working for a lot of people. So read old books, look back. I won't say there's nothing new, but a lot of the things I'm most excited about are actually trends from the past that are just coming back around.
yeah, yeah. That's great. Well, Bailey, thank you so much for being on the Flower Podcast.
Thanks, Scott. I'm glad to be back.